It's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. All right, we got your good news, we got your bad news. What do you want first? Let's get just a couple really quick little bad news things out of the way first. And then largely today, I want to concentrate on good news. And then back to the really big fight in the coming days. So that's our agenda here. Okay, over the weekend, there was a pro-Trump rally at Serb Hall in Milwaukee. And if you saw my post at the Charles Purcell Facebook page that was up for about 20 minutes before I took it down, I want to share this quick little story with you. So there's a video package on a local news channel here, Channel 4, TMJ4, showing this pro-Trump rally, and then some counter-demonstrators showed up, and they faced off a little bit, and, it made for good video. That's what news does. Oh, let's find people fighting. Anyway, toward the end of this video package, I see 4 Trump supporters holding up the Nazi Sieg Heil arm, the Nazi salute. I thought, what the hell is that? And it's clearly on video. The reporter says nothing. The reporter doing the voiceover on this video package says nothing about it. They throw it back to the news anchor. She says nothing about it. And I can't believe what I just saw. It's like, wait a minute, you guys. They're throwing up the Nazi salute. And they said nothing. So I immediately messaged TMJ4, said, hey, you know what? I just saw Trump supporters throwing up the Nazi salute on your package, and you said nothing about it. What's the deal? And I get back a generic response, so thanks for contacting us. We'll get back to you about your concern. It's generic. So I go to bed, wake up the next morning pretty early, and I see I've got a message from them, time marked 2:26 a.m. Yes, we reviewed the video, and indeed, it appears as though what you said is correct, but we don't know the intention of these people, so we're going to look into it. And they said the strangest thing. They said they apologized to me. I'm sorry you had to see that, something like that. Like I was some little old lady offended. No, I wasn't offended. I want to know what happened. So they kind of misread my complaint. So I got back to them. I said, you know what? Don't hide this. Oh, and most importantly, in their message to me, they said they've edited the tape to take that out, to take out the offensive footage. So I wrote back, no, I don't want you to hide this thing. I want you to look into it. I want you to report on this. Come on, find out and let us know. So I was very dissatisfied. It's like, I'll be waiting. I told him I'm going to talk about it on my show Monday. So let me know what you're up to here. If you want to write me back one more time, I'll read your statement. So they never got back to me. And I posted a column on my website, and I shot it over to Facebook along with a picture, which I was able to track down, a picture of them holding up the Nazi salute. And then I found somebody had the video posted to YouTube that was sent to me. So I got to see that. And now here's where I get to eat my words and why I took down the post. It really appears to me that they're praying. They're doing that weird pray thing where you put your hand up. But it's 4 people lined up. Their hands are straight out. I mean, it is the Nazi salute. There is no doubt about it. But they're not giving the Nazi salute. They got their hand up in prayer because they're all bowing their heads. And when you see the video as opposed to the still picture, it also lends a little context because they're swaying a little bit. Like they do when they pray. They're kind of moving. They're kind of swaying a little bit, which you don't see in the still photograph, obviously. So I'm convinced that it was not a Nazi salute. It's why Channel 4 didn't follow up on it. And it's why I immediately removed my scathing column and picture. Oops. You guys, Christians, you fundamentalists who do that prayer thing, you might want to consider something else. because it's exactly, it's the Nazi salute. You guys, you don't want to do that. So I made a mistake. I wanted to make sure I'm clear about that. All right. So let's start the show fresh here. It's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. All right, today's show. Here we go. So, time for some post-mortem here. We've been saying here on The Log all along, ever since Joe became the Democratic nominee, that on day one, after he wins the presidency, which he now has done, on day one, we get back into fighting mode. It took a coalition of literally everybody to defeat the Orange Menace. Everyone from radical lefties to Bernie progressives to moderates, conservatives, and even Republicans. We all said, yeah, okay, all right, coalition. It was all about defeating the Orange Menace. And for some of us, a lot of us, had absolutely nothing to do with Joe Biden. Nothing at all. And we've been saying right here on The Log that on day one, the old band has got to break up. There's nothing wrong with forming a coalition to achieve a goal. Well, we have now achieved that goal. The Orange Menace is gone. Good. Congratulations, everybody. Handshakes all around. Now we go back to work. Now, it's not that we have to demonize everybody, but we got to stand strong here. And there's no way this was never going to be a permanent coalition, you guys. It was put together, this band was put together, this team of Avengers was put together for one purpose. And now that's over. It's on to the next phase. Now, this is huge. I want to say everything in 1.5 hour show, but obviously we can't do that. And we can't even say it in a whole week's worth of shows. This is now our new mission, is to try to understand the path forward. So I'm going to try not to get too frustrated that we can't just make this an easy, digestible little program that saves the world. That's what I want, but it's not going to happen. All right, a couple things I do want to get to today, though. If nothing else, just to introduce the topics for future discussion. One is we have to blow up the myth that we are a divided country. We are not divided. Yes, there are divisions. But what we're hearing from everyone, until it reaches the level of brainwashing that's hard to resist, but you have to try, is that we're a 50-50 nation. We are not. All right, so let's dispel that myth because it's really dangerous. And it's not true. We're not a 50-50 nation. So we got to talk about that. The country is not divided in the way it's being presented to us. To the extent that we are divided, this whole 50-50 thing only shows up in elections and in government. Congress is 50-50. The vote was not too much more than 50-50. So, yes, if you look at that, it looks like we're a divided nation. But if you just dig down a little bit, that's the only place we're divided. In real life, real numbers, real people, we're not divided at all. And then at some point, well, we'll touch on it today, but this requires a long, long conversation over weeks and months probably. And that is the internal fight within the Democratic Party and what to do about that. All right. So first, that's kind of all by way of introduction of the next days and weeks ahead. For today, first, let's start with good news. Let's start with some good news. First of all, the Orange Menace has been vanquished. That's good news. That was our mission. Mission accomplished. Thank you very much. We love you. And I don't know. I've been watching elections for a long, long time. I don't recall ever seeing literal dancing in the streets in every city in this country, in cities around the world. They're ringing church bells. It's really something. I'm not surprised at all. I expected it, and I'm really very happy. So there's no reason we can't feel good for a day or two here. We have to get back into the fight, but yeah, let's celebrate our victory. Why not? as much as I'm going to beat on Joe today and every other day going forward, here's the good news about Joe. I think he's the perfect guy for our immediate emergency situation of the coronavirus. I couldn't choose another person I'd rather have in the job. Happy to have him there. The other good thing I'll say about Joe, and I will repeat what everyone else is saying in this one case, his sort of steadiness, his stableness, his calmness are really excellent qualities right now. The whole kind of heal the nation thing. Now, it gets into particulars that I don't like, some compromises I don't like, and we'll have all that, we'll hash all that out. But just his general demeanor, his general philosophy of being a good and decent person. So that's good news. So I'm happy with Joe in that regard. I'm also very pleased with his first two speeches since election night, where he had 4 pillars that he mentioned in both speeches, that he was unequivocal, clearly putting these 4 issues front and center: the virus, economic hardship, climate change, and systemic racism. And he used the word systemic racism. Now, not only are these the right priorities, every one of these issues, the other side of this election, the Orange Menace and everybody with him, didn't just disagree on how to handle these issues. Every one of these items was literally denied. The reality of the issues themselves was denied by the other side. The virus, not a problem. Big Pharma is just going to come up with cures and vaccines, so the virus, that whole thing is just over. It's not even an issue. Economic hardship, completely ignored. It wasn't even acknowledged, any kind of economic hardship. Not even acknowledged by the other side. Just these platitudes about how everything is great and everything will be great, and policies will just continue to give large tax breaks to billionaires and nothing changes at all. So they weren't even acknowledging the problem. Climate change, literally denying the fact of climate change and saying clearly and loudly that there is no such thing as systemic racism. So as much as I intend to jump on Joe Biden and the corporate Democrats and fight for our causes, I'm very happy to hear those 4 pillars in his very first post-election speech, and then clearly reiterated verbatim those 4 issues in his celebration speech after the election was called. So this is the good news part of the story. As I've often said, I don't trust Joe Biden. I don't think he's smart. But the fact is, the people who pushed him out on stage, the people backstage, his team, the people writing this script, they've given us 4 pillars, not once, but twice, in the strongest language. The virus, economic hardship, climate change, systemic racism. I'm fine with that. So far, so good. This is the good news. And this persona that he's presenting to us as the calm, steady hand, as the empathizer in chief, as the healer in chief, fine. Just fine with it. I can't imagine anybody better for that part of the job. Also in the good news category, we watched all the swing states count their votes, right? And we were all obsessed with that. Little reminder here, while the swing states were counting their votes, every other state in the nation, all 50 states were counting their votes as well. So I say that just as a reminder that those vote totals keep coming in too. And the margin of victory in every state that Joe Biden won is growing a little bit every day. And to get the final count, we're still not quite done with that. Again, that happens in every single election. It's nothing unusual. You count the vote, then you check it, then you double check it. So it takes a while. And by the time it's all said and done, the margin of victory is going to creep higher and higher and higher. And that the popular vote will be well over, 5 million. I'm not sure where it's going to stop. When it's all said and done, not really that close. Yeah, close, but not this razor-thin 50-50 thing. No. I love post-election articles like this. We get all these little breakdowns. And in the good news category, a record-breaking 6 Native candidates were elected to Congress. CBS News. 6 Native American and Native Hawaiian were elected to the House of Representatives on Tuesday, a record-breaking number. Democratic Representatives Sharice Davids won re-election in Kansas, becoming the only Democrat representing Kansas in the House. In Hawaii, Democratic candidate Kalili Kahil defeated his challenger, becoming only the second Native Hawaiian to represent the state in Congress. Oklahoma, Tom Cole and Representative Markwayne Mullin, 2 Republicans, won re-election, both natives. Democratic Congressman Deborah Haaland of New Mexico also won re-election, as did Republican Yvette Herrell in New Mexico. According to Indian Country Today, a total of 13 Native American candidates were competing for House seats this year. The 6 winners have set a record. The group is split evenly by party, 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. As I've said many times, if it was up to me, we would just literally hand the keys of this country over to those with Native descent. Every one of them, every member of Congress, every president going forward. If I had the power to do that, I'd do it. So this is good. Record-breaking. We're looking at some good news today. Good news file. California votes to return voting rights to felons on parole. Yep. I've never agreed with voting rights being taken away for anybody. I don't care if you shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue. Felons, prisoners losing their vote, I've never been in favor of that. And ex-felons, of course they should have the vote. Everybody should vote. There's no such thing as taking away the vote in my book. So this is good. California voters approved a ballot initiative restoring voting rights to Golden State parolees. In its current form, the state constitution disenfranchises Californians with felony convictions who are still incarcerated or on parole. People on probation, in contrast, already have their right to vote enshrined in the state constitution. The new measure, Prop 17, will re-enfranchise about 50,000 people, according to the Los Angeles Times. The measure won support from prominent California Democrats, including Senator Kamala Harris, now Vice President-elect, and Assemblyman Kevin McCarthy, who wrote the initiative. It passed with 59% of the vote, reading from The Hill. So that's good. Yeah, the felons didn't get the same break in Florida. So that's a fight that continues in other states. So good for California. Again, I love these post-election stories every time around because we can find some good news. Reading now from Slate. The 2020 election has already resulted in some historic firsts. In Arizona becomes the 13th state to legalize the recreational use of marijuana. Back in California, for the first time in its 150-year-long history, the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors will consist entirely of women. According to the LA Times, the LA County Board of Supervisors is considered the most powerful local governmental body in the country. Colorado became the first state to create a paid family and medical leave program through a ballot measure. All state residents will have access to 12 paid weeks to care for a new baby, recover from injury, illness, or domestic violence, care for a family member, or report for military service. In Delaware, Sarah McBride, a 30-year-old LGBTQ activist, will become the nation's first openly trans state senator and the highest-ranking openly trans lawmaker in the country after winning her race. McBride was previously an intern in the Obama administration and press secretary for the Human Rights Campaign. Florida, with the victories of Michael Rayner Goolsby and Chevron Jones, Florida has elected its first openly queer black woman as a state legislator and its first openly LGBTQ+ state senator, respectively. Florida voters also approved a $15 minimum wage. Miami-Dade County also elected its first female mayor, considered in Florida the second most powerful executive position in the state after governor. An LGBTQ plus state senator in Georgia for the first time. The first openly trans person elected to the Kansas State House. In Mississippi, I like this one. The state voted to end a Jim Crow-era electoral college-like system that was designed to dilute the black vote in the state. Now, popular vote alone will determine the races for governor and other top offices. Mississippi also approved a ballot measure that will establish a medical marijuana program for patients with specific conditions. So even in Mississippi, we got some good news. Cori Bush is the first black woman to be elected to Congress from Missouri. Recreational pot in Montana and New Jersey. New Mexico's entire House delegation now women of color. More LGBTQ and racial diversity coming from New York. Oregon legalizes psychedelic mushrooms in controlled environments. All right. Have to check out Oregon's controlled environments. The first Asian American elected into the Pennsylvania State Senate. South Dakota, medical marijuana. Tennessee, more LGBTQ representation in the State House. A couple of Texas towns with the first black sheriff and the first black mayor. First openly transgender legislator in Vermont. And finally in Washington, you may have noticed we're going in alphabetical order here, Tara Simmons became the state's first formerly incarcerated state legislator after winning her race for a seat in the state's House of Representatives. I love that. Formerly incarcerated and now in the state House of Representatives. So from state houses to mayor's offices to Congress, more women, more diversity. We have some well-decided prop measures. And there's more and more every election cycle. So basic progress continues. As hard as it is to see sometimes, we got to take heart with these local elections and members of Congress, because that's how it builds from the bottom. And I'm not going to be completely taken in by Kamala Harris. She's a politician. But there was no denying, just no denying, the importance of her presence on this ticket. If you saw her speech after the race was called, the big night in Delaware, how could you not be moved? How could you not be moved by all the cutaway shots when the cameras went to the women in the audience, especially women of color, and especially young women and girls, small girls? It was beautiful. It was moving. There's no denying that. It's a wonderful, beautiful thing. I don't have to become a Joe and Kamala sycophant to acknowledge that. We can do both things at the same time. We can acknowledge the importance and the beauty of Kamala Harris's vice presidency and the positive impact it has on the national psyche. I'm very comfortable embracing that and celebrating that, while at the same time still acknowledging that Joe and Kamala are still basically corporate elites, and I'm going to fight them from the left. That's fine. We can do both things at the same time. And my final little piece of good news here will serve as a segue into our next conversation, because we have to talk about AOC, the squad, progressives generally, this fight that the Democratic Party is having. We'll save that for tomorrow. But let's end today with this. And I did mention this, I think, in a previous program just a day or two ago. But the fact that the women who've come to be known as the squad, that of course would be AOC from New York, Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, Rashid Tlaib of Michigan, and Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, all won handily. So this very nice little wave of progressives that came to us in 2018, all reelected, handily winning their races, and now joined by other so-called Justice Democrats, newcomers to Congress, winning this time around. First-timers Jamal Bowman and Mondaire Jones of New York, Cori Bush of Missouri, and Marie Newman of Illinois, winning their races, joining the so-called Justice Democrats. So there's plenty of good news to point to in the election. There's plenty of fight left to be had, and top among them is the fight for the soul of the Democratic Party. If this was, as Joe put it, a fight for the soul of America, fine, good. Our coalition has had a great victory in that fight. But now the members of that coalition have to figure out how to move forward. And the corporate Democrats, the corporate elites, and even Republicans, John Kasich heading that little faction, the so-called Republicans for Biden, they're all attacking the progressives. They're attacking AOC. They've got them in their sights. The Lincoln Project has immediately re-aimed their sights at AOC and the Justice Democrats, the progressives. Well, I warned you this would take a while. What we really need to talk about next, and in the coming days here, is what I teased earlier. America is not divided. When you look at the polls on the major issues, Medicare for all, gun safety, basic economic issues, immigration, the Dreamers, racial disparities, look at any issue, and by and large, Americans are not that divided. The division happens in presidential elections, in Congress, because of our largely undemocratic institutions. When congressional and presidential elections are divided 50-50, we automatically think that the voters then are divided 50-50, and that the nation as a whole is divided 50-50. No, it doesn't work that way, because our democratic institutions are broken. So starting with the will of the people on various issues as they tell pollsters, and then drawing that line up to representatives in Congress and the White House, somewhere along that line it gets broken because our democratic institutions are broken. So I'll leave you with that today, and with a promise that we'll talk about it in depth in coming days. But you're going to continue to hear, as you've heard now for days and days, everyone, I mean every single voice, telling you that we are a divided nation, that we are a 50-50 nation. We're not. We're not. That's a myth. It's a mistake. And I'll hope to convince you of that in the coming days. All right. Well, I knew we wouldn't have time for all of this. It's way too big. But I did want to start. I wanted to start today with the good news. There's plenty of good news to celebrate before we get back into the tooth and nail fight here. I've said all along, since Joe became the nominee, we fight on day one. Well, okay, maybe I lied a little bit. We celebrate on day one. We fight on day two. All right. Okay, I love you guys. This is The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. Talk to you tomorrow.